Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Basketball Wales podcast series with me, David Jones. And here today we have a very special guest, not just anyone, not someone from the Welsh basketball community, not someone from the Basketball Wales National League. We've got an NBA assistant coach with us here, Tim Lewis. Thank you ever so much for doing this, Tim.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I know we've been going back and forth for a while trying to get this done. How are you doing, first of all? I know you're in California. What's your summer plans at the minute?
It's been pretty manic, actually. I seem to have traveled East Coast to West Coast. I've driven about 10,000 miles this summer. So visited a bunch of places. It started off in Florida and then back and then into Minnesota and then out to California and back, and now I'm back in California doing some sites on the way, sort of Yellowstone National Park and various monuments and stuff on the way. So yeah, it's been a busy summer in that respect.
You need a break, surely, after the NBA season.
Absolutely. Although I think once you get into coaching, it's time off and time down is limited and varied in the way that you get it. So.
Of course. All right, so let's just jump straight into it. Obviously, the reason that we've got you here on the Basketball Wales podcast is because you're the first NBA coach who's got connections to Wales in history. That's quite an achievement. And I just want to see how you bridge that gap, so to speak. So going all the way from the start, what was your first coaching job?
I mean, my first coaching job, I came back from playing in college in the States. Played at Crystal Palace, and while I was playing at Palace, I started coaching there. And then towards the end of my career, I started coaching like some of the regional teams. Got involved in East London Royals with Humph Long and Chris Morgan.
Oh yeah. Good teams.
Yeah, and John Clark, who I then continued to coach with for many years. And we, so I basically was in and out of the sort of the Junior National League, and then was coaching regional teams, the Southeast England teams. And we'd go to Lilleshall with Rick Woolridge and people like that around at the time. Right. So that's really where I started my coaching. I'd obviously embraced it in the schools I was teaching at a grammar school, and then a sort of a preparatory school, private school, and then a Seven Oaks School, which is a big private school. So I sort of established basketball programs there, but I guess the mainstay of my coaching started with regional development stuff, working for England basketball, and doing that.
So was that around the 97, 98 stage? Because I've got some notes that I've scrolled through the internet to find. Is that
that's about
period?
That's around that time. So I finished playing around that time, and for me, obviously, teaching was a way to remain involved with basketball, and then doing this was a way to remain involved with basketball, because at that time in England, the opportunities to coach professionally or even get paid to coach were non-existent. So you found that the majority of people coaching were usually in some sort of teaching profession.
Yeah, of course, because academics is the way in.
Yeah, and the holidays, the summer holidays afforded you, the Christmas holidays afforded you the time to work with teams. So that was where it started, and I was super lucky. I had a great opportunity with doing the regional stuff in a great region where we had some great teams, and I had the support with people like Chris Morgan and Humph Long. And then from there, I got involved with coaching the national teams.
Yeah,
I was an assistant. Yeah, that's really opened my door. I used the national teams more than I did National League.
I see.
To basically move forward in coaching. So I was coaching the regional stuff, and I became an assistant with Rick Woolridge with the 16s, and then became a head coach of the 16s. And then I just progressed. I became an assistant at each age group, 18s and 18s head coach, and then I became the only one I wasn't an assistant that was at the 20s. Okay. And that sort of progressed over a period of time.
And is that how you ended up getting to the GB stuff? Do you think if you hadn't have gone with the national team stuff, and if you'd have gone more with clubs, local teams in the national leagues rather than the actual governing bodies, you would have still been able to make that leap? Because I think the one place that people would most likely know you from is that Olympics.
Yeah, So I think unlikely. The answer to that is probably unlikely.
Yeah.
I think personally feel that there are two systems. You're coaching the National League, or you're coaching. You can do both, obviously, if you have the
Yeah.
opportunity to be
Lots of
fully
teams do.
employed and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
do this stuff in the summer. But I also feel that in order to be involved with the national teams, there should be a progression. You should start at the bottom, regionals, nationals, 16s, 18s, 20s, and you should work your way through those as an assistant, as a head coach.
Okay.
And I think overall we've lost vision of that a little bit. We tend to throw people in right at the top end. They may have been relatively successful in club levels in England,
Yeah. Rookie coaches, like.
but coaching in Europe against these international teams, as we've just seen, the 20s lost to Luxembourg,
Yeah.
Switzerland,
Yeah. Tough.
somebody else in there, that was lower level teams in our eyes, Holland. It's a big jump, and I think
Of
you need
course.
to have that base. So I was extremely lucky and fortunate and grateful, very grateful for the experience that I had, really starting right from the bottom and working my way all the way through 16s, 18s, 20s, and then ultimately had the opportunity to be an assistant with the Olympic program in 2012.
So that earning your stripes kind of system of going from assistant head coach through the younger levels up to the national teams. Do you think that's more of a confidence thing, or do you think you just need those reps as a coach?
I think it's both.
Right.
I think it's important that I think it's important you work under more experienced coaches, and
Okay.
more experience
Tutelage.
might be 1 or 2 years. Yeah. So, for example, I may have been doing the 16s as a head coach for 2 years, and you come in as an assistant.
Mm.
I think it's important that you have the opportunity to learn how this all works, like systems of
Yeah.
play. And I think that's another area within British basketball which I think we've missed out on. We may have streamlined that a little bit now, but
Hmm.
um, there's knowledge to be given, and coaching in Europe internationally is vastly different to coaching in a very watered down national league in Great Britain now.
Of course.
And I just don't know that. I think a lot of our coaches potentially have a false sense of their abilities,
Oh, really?
knowledge, um, based on the level of basketball that they're coaching at, and
I guess that makes
experiences
sense.
that they have. So for me, getting out and coaching in Europe is a huge growth builder for young coaches. So I think it's important that you have the experience working under somebody. You inherit a program, you then develop other coaches, and I think that's what a lot of these other countries have done, is where you start at a lower level and then you
Yeah.
work up and you generate the experience. Um,
I mean, Spain
and
and Turkey do that at such a level.
yeah, and I think that as you go through that system, maybe it's ex-players, maybe it's coaches that have been in the National League, but they may be an assistant, they get the base, and then they go to be a head coach at the under 16 level, and they
Yeah.
fail, or they're not very good, or it's not for them, or the level is too high for them. And I
Hmm.
think you find that way. But right now, we seem to just appoint people to a level. We'll appoint somebody straight in at the 20s that's maybe never coached at the 16s, and so therefore you've never gone through and learned the
I see.
progressions. So to me, that's important. I think I
Yeah.
benefited immensely from it. I saw the benefit of that. I worked with some great coaches, like I say, Humph Long, Chris Morgan, Rick Woolridge, Dave Titmus.
Oh, wow.
Um, all those people were head coaches above me.
Mm.
I worked with Jimmy Guyman, who was my
Oh,
assistant.
wow.
I worked with Paul McKeskey, who was my assistant. And for me, it was important to have, when I was selecting an assistant, to have somebody also. I mean, in Jimmy and Paul McKeskey, I had two people that had an immense wealth of
Right.
knowledge. And you're always learning, no matter what level you go to. I'm always learning about the game. You're always trying to get better. And, um, you know, all of those people that I mentioned were hugely instrumental in helping me grow and develop as a coach.
Right.
So that to me is the benefit of going through those progressions rather than just jumping in as a head coach. Um,
I think that's really interesting because
that's
you hear those words, growth and development, for players an awful lot. but for coaches, what do you think that growth actually is? Like, if you were to measure it, what's the thing that grows? What's the thing that develops? Is it your understanding of the game, or man management as they use in other sports? You know, is it just your philosophy, your style? What is the actual thing that grows and develops?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit all the points. I mean, I think as a young coach going in your first experience of coaching, I mean, I say you see it here. You see a lot of coaches that go in and coach. Their first experiences as a head coach of an NBA team,
Yeah.
and some of them are, some of them succeed, some of them fail.
Yeah.
But I think the big part for anybody is you have to know who you are. You know,
Mm.
the way I want to play, my philosophy, the style of basketball I want to play. Um, how do I communicate and manage players? That's not. It's, I think everybody thinks they can walk into an environment and do that, but that's not an easy thing to
I'm not
do.
sure I could.
Yeah, and I think that comes with experience and years and
Yeah.
knowledge and watching and learning other people. Um, and then absolutely learning the game and understanding the game. The game we play in England is kind of nondescript. We're neither a European or American in terms of the style of basketball we play.
100%.
We're not really sure where we want to be. Um, when you go to Spain or you go to Europe, any teams in Europe, there is a very clear
It's so visual.
way, yeah, that they want to play. So I think as a coach, all of those things in terms of your growth, in terms of, my first experiences of going and playing against European teams,
Yeah.
coaching against European teams, was vastly different to coaching in the National League in London,
Of
where
course.
we had in East London, we had a ton of athletes from the area. We could run and jump and run and play hard and turn teams over and score very easily. And when you came to Europe, the adjustment is huge, and sometimes we don't fully embrace that.
Yeah.
So I think it's the overall package for these coaches. I think
Okay.
I don't know, the younger generation I've seen, there's a lot more brashness and
You could say
confidence
that.
in
Yeah.
their abilities, that
Yeah.
they don't need that they can step into any job
Mm.
right away and they can be super successful. And I don't think that happens at a high rate.
No, probably not unless you've got
So
LeBron on your team.
yeah, I mean, sure, if you're lucky enough to get
Yeah.
some of these youth teams where you might have potential NBA draft picks down the road, then you're going to be pretty successful. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's another area. I mean, I believe firmly that in Great Britain we have better talent than 90% of the teams in Europe. It's just what we deliver and how we deliver it, and the
Yeah.
education that we give these players.
That's spot on. I couldn't agree with you more. There's so many teams that we should be easily beating at a national level. And they just seem to have that, again, it's that identity. They know what they go back to, what they fall back on, what their system is. And that always seems to unpick us. I just want to go back to one
Well,
thing you said. Sorry. Um,
no, no, no.
you said about going out there and getting experience away from home, so to speak. Well, I think you've got such a resume of doing that I just want to hit on some of those different places. I mean, I'm looking at my notes here. You got Japan, you got Qatar, obviously the US now, the Philippines. I mean, these are such kind of crazy moves that have probably given you such a repertoire and a resume of skills as a coach. I mean, what was the reasoning for going like so far afield? Or was it just, that's a great experience, I'm going for it? Or was there like a
For sure.
plan?
No, I mean, there's always a method to my madness. I think it. I was very clear in my own mind. I wanted to coach, and I wanted to coach at a high level, and I wanted to get better. And I
Right.
realized that that wasn't going to happen in the UK.
Okay.
Um, we, it all started. I mean, really, in 2006, I got divorced, and it opened the door an opportunity for me now to say, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to leave
Right, I
teaching.
hear
I'm
you.
tired of teaching, and I want to coach professionally.
Mm,
And I think that's the biggest hurdle for 90% of the people that are involved with basketball in the UK.
really?
And in conversations I've had with people, the first conversation is, well, they got to pay me this much. And, I've got this job and I can't. And so it's really hard. If you're not
Yeah.
prepared to say, I'm taking the opportunity over the money initially, then
Hmm.
you're never going to be able to get out of the UK. because you're not going to walk into a job that's going to pay you $30,000-$40,000 at minimum to coach in Europe. You're going to pay you 500 to 700 to 1,000 euros a month.
Yeah.
And so that's been, I think, is one of the biggest restrictors for British basketball. There's two things. One, we're not recognized as a basketball country.
Yeah.
People immediately, they say, you're from England, where they play soccer, cricket, and rugby. Those are the things. You don't play basketball there. So that's one of the biggest hurdles you have to get over, is that we're not seen as a country that produces coaches or players.
Of course. We're trying to change that, but that's definitely how we are right now, yeah.
For sure. Absolutely. And the second one is that people don't want to give up the comfort of their teaching jobs or the jobs that allow them to coach. They're now making reasonable money to survive and exist in the UK. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the only way it's going to happen is you're going to have to take a low level. So I met somebody, a guy called Rob Ariana, and I worked in Gran Canaria for 2 years.
Yeah.
I earned next to no money. But it was an opportunity just to get away and be immersed in basketball. And then the first full-time, was in Germany.
I see. Yes, I got
and that was I was actually here, came back, and then we at that point started the Essex Pirates.
Oh, okay.
And the Essex Pirates was, I don't think ever really fully understood, except by a couple of people, Warwick Can and a few others within British basketball, was I was so at the point where we had found so many talented players in England through the national team programs that I'd been involved in, but nobody wanted to give them the opportunity. We continued to hire 5 Americans, 6 Americans, whatever it was at the time, and these young British players were at the back end of a bench and they would never play.
Yeah, everyone's desperate to get those college players in. Yeah,
absolutely. And I had always been passionate about creating opportunities for young British players, and that's what we did. Off the back of the ACE program, we basically created an opportunity for them to play in the ACE programs, to play in the Essex Pirates, bring in young talent. Jamel Anderson, Miles Hessen, Zach Gachette, Colin Singh.
Oh, right. I never realized those guys came through there.
Yeah, and the total list. And so we weren't the ones that discovered them by any means. There are other people in Birmingham that discovered them. But what we did, I felt, was we put them in a position to be seen and ultimately create an opportunity. And was Essex perfect? No, it wasn't perfect. I mean, it was early stages. Money was tight. I funded it primarily myself with the support of somebody else that ran some Audi dealerships.
I mean, it was 15 years ago. It makes sense, It's not at the place it is now.
Yeah. And then we ran into hurdles. We wanted to move the program into London to Crystal Palace, and we just met resistance. We met resistance from local academies. We had a university link set up with UEL. We had it set to move into Crystal Palace with Greenwich Leisure, Roger Morland. And then we just met resistance from a couple of BBL owners, a couple of academies in the area that I feel to this day felt that we were a threat and didn't see it. And we got a lot of grief at the time from people. We didn't win, and we only won 7 games or something, or 4, whatever it was. But that wasn't the intent. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to put a team out there to develop, and over years that would then hopefully grow. But of course, that got cut short, as it does. No funding, no TV, nothing to really help promote it.
Yeah.
And from there, I went to Germany. So then, I actually went to Sheffield for 6 months and left. It wasn't the experience that the Sharks wasn't really the experience that I'd hoped for.
Right.
I then got an opportunity to go and coach in Germany, and I jumped on it. Again, paid me very little. Coached their Pro B team. We were super successful. Got to the playoff semifinals, which hadn't been done with just a youth German selection.
Okay.
And then was also working with their BBL team as player development and working around Torsten Liebernath and just learning.
Right.
From that is when I got the opportunity to go and coach in Japan.
Oh yeah, how was that?
It was great. awesome, absolutely fantastic place.
Right.
Would recommend it to anybody. I mean, the level of basketball is high.
Mm.
They pay well.
It's
Um,
huge all over Asia. The whole sport is crazy over in Asia. I don't think
Absolutely,
people
yeah.
realize.
No. And then that opened the doors to come back to the US, where I worked for the Phoenix Suns. I came back and worked for the Phoenix
Yes,
Suns
yeah,
in the
yeah.
G League with Bakersfield Jam. From there, I went to Toronto for the 905 and also worked with some player development when Nick Nurse was as an assistant there.
Oh,
I
okay,
then
before Kawhi.
left that summer with all intentions of coming back to Toronto
Right.
um, to continue to be involved with the program there. And I had an opportunity to go and coach the Thai national team. Got there, we were super successful. We was offered an opportunity to stay there for 2 years, and financially, it made sense. I felt it was a good step because it was coaching a national team in the Asian Championships,
Yeah.
um, Southeast Asian Games, and stuff like that. So I did that for
Big
two
time.
years. Left there, went to Qatar for a year, coached the national team again. Went
How
to
is
the Asian
that?
Champions. It was interesting, different. I was actually there in a bad time, and
Right.
they had a blockade. They
I
basically the
see.
rest of the Gulf states had blockaded Qatar, so you couldn't
Oh,
actually
right.
travel to
Oh no, what
Dubai
a
or any of the other
shame.
places.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
so
say
we
that
were.
would have been one of the big selling points, right? Like you get
Yeah,
to
for sure. Yeah, I
experience the
mean,
Middle East.
usually people would have traveled at the weekends to go to Dubai, get out of
Yeah.
Qatar, and do whatever. But we played. We played in the World Cup qualifying, Olympic qualifying rounds. Teams like Australia, New Zealand,
Proper
um,
teams still. They will still
Iran.
compete.
Oh yeah, no, I mean
Mm.
really, really strong level of competition. Um, and again, for me, that was there was an opportunity there now to coach at an even higher level than I'd
Yeah.
coached at when I was in Thailand and on the international scene. And I think what the opportunities that it got, we just done it the right way. Just coached the right way. The teams played in the right way, and it gets noticed. And I
Yeah.
think it's such a global, such an opportunity to see things um, at a higher level on the international basketball. Um, that then led for me the opportunity for me to sort of leave Qatar.
Yeah.
I came back. I then basically processed my green card with the intention of wanting to be in the States.
Makes sense.
So shut down stuff overseas for that period of time, and then obviously the opportunity to get back with Chris at Minnesota
Yeah.
came
Huge.
up. Um, and it's
What
you
a
know,
journey.
again, it's never been about the money. There's been a couple of places there where the money's been better, but even coming
Hmm.
back to the NBA, the money's, you're not making millions of dollars.
No, of
But
course.
it's about the opportunity to be in an environment where,
It's the environment. It's the
yeah,
environment.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, where you have an opportunity to be involved in that, and so that has always been at the top of the list, the pinnacle
Of
of
course.
doing
For
things. I
everyone.
mean, and you have to be realistic and open-minded about where you're going to be able to coach,
Yeah.
at what level in the NBA you're going to be. Probably never going to be a head coach in the NBA, but being around it on a day-to-day basis
Hmm.
and having an ability to impact and be involved
Yeah.
is huge.
In
So
in my notes here, your title is assistant coach with responsibility for game plan review. So can you just
yes.
walk me through that? So is that literally scouting each team and preparing the game plan for each specific game, or is that just your game plan, like your
So
system?
so it's a bit of both. So we will obviously game plan each game.
Yeah.
We'll look at personnel, and
Hmm.
then obviously in terms of game planning, in terms of what we want to do against certain actions or how they
Matchups.
play. So I would have a large part in terms of just providing information about that. I would then
Okay.
also, after the game, go back and look at the game plan and report back to Chris. This is what we did. This is how we did it. This is what was successful. This is
I
what we need
see.
to address. So that, and it's never been done in the NBA before. So it was the first time it's been done. And
Oh
Chris had
wow.
this vision for a while. This is something that he felt was really beneficial.
Mm.
So when we then come to play Dallas the next time, we can pull out this and look at it and say, hey, in pick and roll, we were up in a high wall, but we should have been in a drop because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, fantastic.
They
That's so
heard, you know,
interesting.
yeah. So it not only helped the team, but it helped me too. It helped me in my growth as a coach to
I
just another
bet.
level of learning and knowledge.
Yeah.
So going back to constantly learning, constantly being able to remember
Mm-hmm.
sorry, not remember, but learn about
Yeah.
new stuff and take on board stuff. That
Okay.
was obviously instrumental in all that. So
That's so interesting. So that's the first time there's been someone specifically for that. I mean, that's a great pub quiz question that I'll never get asked, but I'll always know the answer to. So thank you for that. That's so interesting. I mean, I don't know how much you can talk about your actual stuff at Minnesota, but in terms of game plan, I've always been so interested in your team from the start of last season, from the second you made the Rudy trade, at how you were going to set up that lineup with Cat and him. I mean, do you have a personal philosophy on it? I don't know how much you're allowed to talk about it. How do you envision
no,
those two big guys playing together?
I think that we were hindered unfortunately this year with Cat's injury,
Yeah, of course.
and so we never fully got to see that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So next year,
Um,
once again, just you're
yeah,
going to be my big
I mean,
league pass
I
team.
think it's exciting. I mean, the game has changed and it's morphed a certain way, but
Hmm.
Rudy is such a high level
Yeah, man.
player in his own way, in
Every
terms
year.
of what he offers, and complements Cat because Cat is obviously a more versatile, popping big, face up big, can stretch the floor. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's really exciting.
Right.
Um, I think there's an opportunity for it to be really successful, and um, it's hard. It's so hard. So many people have judged it, but it's so hard
Yeah.
after a year where you didn't have one of your main components to
No, of
say that
course.
it was a failure.
Yeah, it's too soon for
And
that.
it wasn't in our mind. It wasn't. I mean,
No.
there were so many things that were so successful, regardless of whether Cat was with us or not.
Yeah.
So I think it's super super promising.
Yeah.
I think the roster looks extremely exciting.
We've got to see a
And
lot from
Anthony.
Ant. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean Anthony's an exceptionally young, exceptional talent.
He's one of my favorite players to watch
Um,
in the entire league.
and the addition of Mike Conley last year helped us immensely. Just
Yeah.
a great person, great leader.
And
In
an
terms of
adult. Yeah.
yeah, what people needed in in the locker room.
Of course.
So
I love D'Lo,
no,
but
I
that was a
mean
trade that you needed to make.
yeah, for sure. I mean just a variety of reasons, and
Hmm.
he had some success when he got to LA, but no, I think keep your eyes peeled and posted, and I think it'll be an exciting year. I think there's a lot of everybody comes into the season healthy, then
Yeah.
it puts you in a point where it's a chance to really work on being what we wanted to be last year
Of course. I
with
mean,
that
the West seemed to
dynamic.
be in such a flux anyway that I think there's real spaces up for grabs in, that 6-5-4-3 kind of slots. I don't think it's set in stone. I think the East, people kind of have their favorites. People kind of know where people sit and rank. I think the West is wide open. I mean,
Yeah,
probably bar Denver.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, and we, you know, I think if you look at it, like those top teams
Yeah.
we beat and competed with all year.
No,
Golden
for sure.
State, SAC, and LA, and even to a point Denver. I mean, so we're right there. I think the big difference for the whole organization is that having Chris at the helm
Mm,
over time will just make such a huge difference to the organization in
yeah,
terms of direction and the ability to draw everything out of those players. So
that makes sense. Some continuity I feel like you need as well. Just years
absolutely, yeah,
of repetition. All right, well,
yeah,
we've kind of already gone into NBA stuff, but I want to do a proper NBA chat with you. I mean, Summer League's obviously just finished. How involved, if at all, were you with the Summer League? Obviously, Minnesota went 1-4, but Josh Minnow and Brandon Williams stood out to me in a few games. I mean, how involved are you in the Summer League kind of action?
yeah. I wasn't involved at all this year. I
Right.
actually took that time. I wasn't. I didn't even go to Vegas, so
Oh,
it's
wow.
yeah. So it's first time. I'm trying to think. First time in many years.
Right.
But I mean, yeah. I mean, some of the leagues hit and miss. I mean, it
No,
all
of course.
depends on the level of talent you got. You haven't got a lot of time to
Yeah.
really put a lot of structure in. But I think for us, and I would, a lot of teams, the key there is having the ability to see these young, talented players you've either drafted or
Right.
looking to bring in via G League, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was a huge success for the organization.
Fab. I mean, I can't really talk about summer league and youngsters in the league without bringing up Wembanyama. I mean, what are your thoughts? What do you think this guy's going to be? Obviously, I think he was kind of slated after that first game. Huge overreaction, in my opinion. But what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on Wembanyama generally?
he's a generational talent. I
You
mean,
think
and he's gone to a program where they've got a proven history of developing players like that.
you could
So,
say?
I mean, who knows? I mean, you just don't. I mean, there's so many things that can affect
Mm,
his rise to stardom.
right.
Not just his ability to play the game, but his physical stature and strength
Yeah.
and all that stuff. But I mean, he clearly has,
Defensively, at least, he's
like I
going to
say,
be a
yeah.
presence.
I mean, he's just an amazing talent,
Yeah.
and like I say, in a great place to be developed with the Spurs.
Yeah. Tim Duncan's not a bad guy to
Um,
learn from about playing in the post.
yeah, and he's got Tony Parker around him. That
Yeah.
there's a French colleague that wants to see him be successful. So it's
Yeah. The French connection. Yeah.
I mean I'm he's it's just a typical overreaction, I would say, of people at that early stages.
Right.
Where just looking for a reason to say you can't be
Of course.
successful, and
Of course.
but I don't think there'll be any problems with him
Yeah.
adjusting. Is he going to find it different when he starts to play in the NBA? Of course he is. I
Of course.
mean,
Physical.
yeah, it's a very different league, and he's going to be playing against 40-year-old men,
Yeah.
that have been playing in the league for 20 years.
Absolutely.
So,
He needs to put some
but I
muscle on
think
that for sure.
he'll end up being just fine.
Right. There's obviously one other guy. I mean, Brandon Miller, I feel like people kind of skip over him a lot, but the storylines kind of lead towards Scoot Henderson. What do you think of him? Did you watch any of Portland's games in the summer league? I mean, he looked incredible.
I didn't.
Ball
No, I
there.
didn't see him.
Right.
I mean, obviously the talk around that is like just him and Dame being able to play together.
Yeah. That was going to be my next
So,
point.
I mean, high level players. I mean, these guys are going to impact
Mm-hmm.
those programs, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll find a way of making it really work.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, I was interested to see, because obviously you've worked quite a fair bit with the G League. Do you think it translates? So we've seen kind of a few players now take that route instead of college, like Kuminga, Jalen Green, and now Scoot. Do you think that that's a genuine route that people should be considering more often, other than going straight to college and then one and done MBA?
yeah, I mean, I think it's hard, isn't it? I mean, you've got a league where you've got rugged adults, like I just said, like 40 years old, that you're
Yeah.
playing against 19-year-olds. But I think the G League is now, over time, elite, are now starting to prove that these players are capable of being in the NBA.
Mm.
Are they fully NBA ready? Who knows? But even the kid Beauchamp this year,
Yeah, man. Looked awesome.
that played in the G League for 1 year, and was it an unbelievable year? I don't know, but he had moments of
Yeah.
exceptional brilliance. So I think it's definitely there. It's not for everybody. I think there is definitely value to some players remaining in school for the duration, because it helps them as not only basketball players but just as adults to grow up and
Right, yeah, that's the thing people
mature.
talk about, isn't it? That kind of structure and
Yeah.
how that can translate.
So I think you just got to be really clear about, and specific about whether or not it's not, like I say, it's not for everybody. So you got to be
Right.
clear and specific about which players that's going to be. Can they physically cope with that? And are they talented enough to step in? And the answer is yes. There are definitely players within the G League, and I think
for
it's
sure.
a great route.
For sure.
Having been involved in 3 teams now in the G League, it's
half of Miami's roster.
third best league in the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
third best league in the world, behind probably the
100%.
EuroLeague, and the NBA. And so there are some hugely talented, and I think some of these players now are also going overseas, young high school players that are going
Yeah.
overseas. I think that's, for them, it's huge. I think one of the deficiencies that US basketball has faced is the lack of structure and skill
Right.
sometimes that you see from European players.
I mean, they dominate the league now. I mean, Giannis, Jokic, Doncic, everyone
Yeah,
seems to be who's come from
just
outside the
fundamentally, they're
European.
better. Their development is better. Seems to be better.
Right.
You have
Why is
raw
that?
talent, raw. I think they just don't focus on it the same way they do in Europe.
The kind of
They don't
stardom
in
of it.
high. Yeah, well, in high school, you don't start. You don't really practice till October or November.
Right.
Then you're done, and then they're into something else, and then it's AAU, and AAU is not. They're not really teaching. They're just throwing them
No,
out there to play games.
absolutely. And
Whereas in
so many
Europe,
games.
yeah, and in Europe, you're going 7 days a week. You
Yep.
know, you got practice twice a day, you play 2 games a week, maybe, like even at a junior level. And so
Hmm.
there's a much more of a focus on fundamentals
Okay.
um, at the earlier stages with European players than there is with things. And they've seen that in FIBA competitions. You know, some of
Absolutely.
these younger US teams win on
Hmm.
talent and athleticism, but struggle with the skill set. So
For
I
sure.
think that's just really where it balances. And then when you get players like Jokic, who, combine that with just his exceptional
Yeah.
ability to play the game, it makes a huge difference. But yeah,
I think Jokic is perhaps the most ridiculous person I've ever seen play basketball. I mean, I haven't been watching basketball as long as a lot of people, but for me, I don't think I've ever seen anything like him, like a 7 foot tall Larry Bird. It's unbelievable to watch what he can do. Um,
yeah, I mean, he's by far probably the best player in the league now.
you think that's guaranteed 100% the best player in the league?
Yeah, I don't see. I think by far,
Yeah,
just his ability to read and play the game and the
yeah.
things that he can do.
I think I have to agree with you. I think Yanis will be angry at that comment, but I completely agree with you. So I just want to circle back quickly. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
we haven't got a resolution to this Dame situation at the moment. I mean, what's your perspective on that? There's obviously an awful lot of dialogue about the amount of commitment he's given Portland, the amount of years he served on teams where, free Dame was always the talk. But now he's demanding a trade and he says he only wants to go to Miami. I mean, how do you view that as someone who works for a team? That's putting Portland in a really difficult position. But some people think, I mean, they've got to give it to him. He's been so good to Portland. You got to pay that back. What's your perspective?
I I think I mean it's just becoming commonplace now for the top these top 10 guys to sort of say
Yeah.
this is where I want to go, and it's very much a players' league. It's hard. I mean, Portland obviously wanted to get something back in return.
Yep.
I'm not involved in that situation. It's really hard to know and understand it to say, but I'm sure if Portland could make it work and get young talent or draft picks or
Yeah.
stuff that's of value back from Miami, then it's a win-win for both teams. So he wants to. I'm sure he wants to win a championship. He's
Yeah.
not getting any younger, and he sees that Miami.
I mean,
I
Dame
mean, there's a
Jimmy
bunch
Bam.
of yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a a number of reasons to go to Miami.
Yeah.
Tax-free income,
Right.
makes more money there. Basically,
Yeah. Of
plays
course.
with a group of players that have a vision and a culture that
And
want to
Spo.
win.
And Spo.
Want to win championships and have that mindset. And
Mm.
is that where Portland's at right now? I don't know. So
Yeah, probably not. Probably looking for a rebuild because they got such a good young guard trio. I love Shaden Sharp. I love Anthony Simons, and now Scoot. Just makes sense for them both to part ways, I think. I mean, I've got to ask you one thing quickly. Obviously, it's a new thing this year. You had a lot of people pointing out different issues with it. Some people love it, and that's the NBA Cup. I mean, as someone who's involved with the team, how do you feel like it's going to interfere or impact the league? How do you think it's going to make that kind of change?
I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. I don't know. We haven't really discussed it,
Oh,
to be
right.
honest with you.
It's not even a thought on
Not
your
at our
mind.
level.
Interesting.
No, not at our level. I haven't been involved in those discussions, and so I don't really know what the feel is. I mean, it's new, it's different. The NBA
Yeah.
is constantly trying to um, make it more appealing for give a new dimension to the league. So I'm sure it'll be hugely successful.
Right.
And
Get everyone to Vegas December time.
Yeah. So we'll see what.
Hmm.
I think the first time round, you'll probably have a better idea of what people think about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. The only reason I'm really asking you is because obviously having spent time in the UK, I think from my perspective, I don't understand what people are worried about. You hear lots of these NBA writers and ESPN guys saying about how it's a distraction from the league. There's no stakes. But having grown up personally in the UK, where it's FA Cup football, trips to Wembley, these things mean an awful lot. For me, I think it's gotta. If you give it time, it's going to end up being something people really care about. And I wondered if maybe you share that perspective, having spent some time in the UK
Yeah,
as
I mean,
well.
I would share the same opinions. I mean, we never think about it. You
Yeah.
never think about how these cups. I mean, I think one of the only things that, like, say, the FA Cup has allowed some of these teams to do is they play some of their other players.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that will be the approach or not. I don't know. I think, I mean, we play 82 games,
Yeah.
which is a lot.
Of course.
So, that's a little different to the soccer and things like that, I think. But
Of course.
I don't know. I think it'll add a new dimension. It's really hard. Like I say, we've
Yeah.
not really discussed it. It's not been a topic of
That's interesting in
conversation.
itself.
But
yeah, tournament basketball.
Within us, but I'm sure within everybody, in the higher, in the front office and stuff, it's been on their mind, and Chris and stuff. But and I haven't really thought about it, and probably for that reason, we did it in the G League.
Right.
We've done it in European teams I've ever been with, and in Japan we did it, and so it never seems like an odd thing to do.
Right. Was it always additive in those kind of things, or was there ever a time where it's like, got to prepare for a cup game now, where it's all or nothing and it's added pressure?
No, I mean, there's obviously different pressure because it's
Yeah.
this one thing that, like in
course.
the Emperor's Cup in Japan, like there's a big emphasis placed on that, but it never really affected the way that you approach the league or how you prepared for that or did things. So
that's interesting. Well, I've got one more question for you, and this is just for my personal needs. So I'm a Boston Celtics fan. Being Celtic, it felt only right. So I've got to ask. I've had an awful lot of issues over this summer with the Jaylen Brown extension coming up, and then the massive trade Smart for Porzingis. I mean, what's your thoughts on that trade? First of all, Smart ending up in Memphis, Porzingis ending up, and then obviously he got extended to 3 for $90 with all of his injury concerns. I mean, Marcus Smart was kind of like the heart and soul of this Boston team for the past 7 years, and I've had a real difficulty coming to terms with it. And I'm just wondering if you and all your experience can kind of clarify the thinking.
I think the Celtics have. I mean, I'm a Celtics fan myself. Went to high school there. Always loved Bird and all that when I was in high school. But I think the Celtics have needed a center. They are trying to play differently to the way that they've played in the past.
Right.
Williams is constantly injured. Not that Porzingis isn't.
That's what I mean.
So Smart was unhappy. I think probably unhappy with his role. I don't know the inside and outside politics. Tradable pieces. He'll fit Memphis's approach to everything they're doing.
You bet.
I think it'll be interesting to see how that starts. I think.
Do you think they're going to play Porzingis with one of Rob or Al, or do you think he's going to be the 5 and they'll play Tatum 4?
I mean, I think they have a ton of opportunities to do all of that. They can play small now.
Right.
They can go back to playing small with Al Horford at the 5, and which caused us problems. And then they can go bigger, with Porzingis at the 5, or even Porzingis at the 4, and Williams on the floor at the 5.
Yeah,
so I think it gives them some different dynamics. Mm-hmm. I think it will be really interesting. Traditionally the Celtics have been pretty good at putting the rosters together, and
trust in Brian.
So I think they've still got the core of those other guys around, and I think they just lacked experience in terms of coaching this year. For Mazzulla, they did as much as they could with his inexperience, and
they've brought in some
who
big
knows?
guys now, like Sam Cassell and other
Yeah, for sure.
assistants to really aid
Just
him.
strengthen him around what he's doing. So
Yeah.
hopefully they have a good year.
I'll check back in with you to see when Porzingis tears his ACL on game 3 and I'm crying for the rest of the season. I'll check in with you. But okay, just to circle back for the final point, having been to all these different places, all these different cultures, with the focus of your career being basketball, how can basketball in Wales, maybe let's make it a bit broader, make it a bit easier, how can basketball in Britain take the steps to reach the heights of these places, like in Asia, like in the US? What can we do? What's the one thing that's missing so that we can get better?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that's missing is still facilities.
Right.
The access to facilities where you don't have to pay, where people own their facilities, where you can practice from noon, from dusk to dawn,
Right.
Dawn to dusk, I should say. And I think that still holds us back. I think that's one of the biggest problems in England.
Right.
I also think that there's not enough money put into the development of coaches.
Okay. Makes sense.
I think that the coaches will underpin everything you do in terms of the and coaches that will then develop players in the correct way, not just throw the ball out and have great athletes and do whatever. And that all comes from experience and the structure. And I think the other thing is that we weakened the National League to such an extent where our best players no longer play against each other week in, week out.
Yeah.
And we're such a small country in terms of our footprint.
Yeah.
When I started coaching, I'm going to move and talk because I'm going to have to plug you in here. I just realized my battery.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Take us on a tour.
So I think that the restructuring of the National League has hurt us. I think when you look back and had teams like East London Royals, and Manchester, and all these teams were playing each other.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you getting all my blurriness here.
No, it's all right.
We had far better teams. When I played as a junior at Crystal Palace,
mm-hmm.
We were traveling to Manchester and Birmingham week in, week out, and there's additional expense, but we played against the best players in the country. And now I think, you could be the best player in England and you may play against another top 5 kid twice in a season, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just the impression I get, is that we diluted the National League so much and we got so many teams.
Yeah.
And I know the ACE program and that system was supposed to try and address that.
Yeah,
but
that was the plan, at least.
So I just feel like we don't necessarily have our best talent playing against best talent or being channeled to one specific team in a region. So let's say there's 8 regions, 10 regions. In those regions, that's where those 10 teams are where we want our best players to be placed. And there should be a path where there is coach development where the best 10 coaches are going to end up over a period of years. And then maybe the next generation of assistants is under them and so on and forth. But it's so spread out. It's so watered down. You never really have a true perspective. Absolutely. And you could be in London with an exceptionally talented, athletic group of players and win every game and stand out. That doesn't necessarily make that a great program or a great coach, but sometimes we misinterpret that.
Yeah.
And so I just think that, and I get it. I'm sure it's to do with funding.
Yeah.
A lot of it will be to do with funding. That helps generate the ability to run the leagues and do stuff.
Mm-hmm. I do think that's about to change. We had a big sport in school survey across the UK, and basketball came up as only second to football now for most participated sport under 18. Huge change from the past few years. So hopefully we're on the track to getting some more funding, getting that kind of government recognition.
Yeah, I think, I read an article, and this is going back probably 5 or 6 years at some point,
Right.
maybe. Basketball globally
Mm.
is played more than soccer.
Really?
Yeah, there was an
Okay.
article written about it, and I'd have to dig it out. It was in the Times or somewhere
Okay.
that it had taken over soccer in terms of the numbers of people participating, partly because the
It's
NBA
been
is
the
influenced
fastest
now
growing
in
sport for about a
China.
decade, so it wouldn't
Right.
surprise me too much.
So inside China and India and
Yeah,
these countries,
makes sense.
um, the problem with the problem with with basketball in Great Britain is that the funding
Yeah.
is never going to come because they're not deemed to be medal winners, and so it's sort of
Right.
all backwards to me, and has been unfair. Like even the men's program now, I think they got no funding.
Yeah.
Um, they pulled out of Olympic qualifying. They've got a camp this summer. They'll jump back into European qualifying,
Yeah.
but they've never been able to secure a continual funding because we can't win medals. And so if you
So
can't win medals, there's
backwards.
no money. Yeah, so
So
if there's no
backwards.
money, and it just seems to hold the sport back. There's
Yeah.
no money. I don't know the impact of the 777 money and how that's really influenced it. But my fear when that happened and was announced was that money was going to go into BBL teams, and it was just going to get absorbed into
London.
hiring
It's
new
being absorbed by
Americans.
London.
And
That's the honest truth.
yeah, and obviously London, they've done well. I mean,
Yeah.
I just saw that Ryan Schmidt's left. He's gone back. I think he's taken a
Yeah.
job in working with Atlanta, but in their
Yeah.
G League organization.
That was a
Um,
big move for him.
yeah, I mean, he was with Toronto. He's gone back. I don't know. He's probably going to be. Maybe he's being the head coach there. I don't know. Um, London. I've always felt, and that was part of the Pirates' plan, was we would love to have developed that to be a team that then competed like Palace did,
Yeah.
run things out of London competitions, and then compete in European championships. Um,
That's the big
yeah,
goal.
sorry, EuroLeague and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I'd love to be involved in something like that going forward. But the frustration is we seem to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I know some of the other teams are now starting to play in Europe.
Yeah, 4 BBL
Um,
teams in various European competitions next season. First time.
Competitions or something, which is a huge step forward.
Yeah.
Um, but we still, I don't know, I don't see the same level, or don't see the same level of English talent that was there when we played back at Palace those days.
Definitely not.
Um, and that's partly down to the funding, the money, the amount of Americans, and the security of winning comes with hiring your
Yeah.
overseas players.
Sam Decker
So,
was MVP for a reason.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sam played in Houston. He was an NBA player. I mean,
Yeah.
to have him playing there and playing in that league was a huge benefit to that organization. So
100%.
um, I just think that unless you invest in your coaches somehow and have a better system
Mm.
in terms of filtering them, not just, hey, I'll do it because I got all the time in the world
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
to do it, whatever.
Some kind of
So
commitment.
I don't know. I still British basketball still frustrates me. I spoke heavily with Kieran and a few other people at the beginning of the summer about it, and have an immense desire to be involved. I mean, I played with Wales, I played with England, I
Yeah.
played with Great Britain with Glasgow, and I've coached at those levels, and I still have a desire to be involved. But um, when you start to get to behind the scenes and know that there's, Chris Grant published a statement about, it's
It
just
was a tough
disheartening to
one
see
to
that.
read. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's just disheartening to know that really we're not any better, as much as we put out there. And
Social media makes it look like it's really, really taking a huge step. But then at a funding and government level, it's just not being supported as much as it needs to be.
and charging for TV to watch the teams to help fund the junior
Yeah, GB
programs this year. The
Basketball
fact that we've
TV.
got no money really to fund our junior programs to go and play in European
It's
championships
a real shame.
it was crazy. And I honestly believe that when we had Warwick, Can, in terms of in charge of our development,
Yeah, yeah,
and I know we had more money and funding and Chris Spice and stuff. There was a real feel as though we were moving somewhere, and
okay.
I thought Warwick did an unbelievable job
A lot of people
in
would
terms
agree
of
with you. A lot of people would agree with you.
development of our younger players.
Right.
He had vision. He had an idea of where it needed to go, and he knew how to do it. And I think we lack that now. I think we need people with his experience, somebody that understands his experience around the game of basketball, because it benefited us. And I also think we need to have, I often go back and say, I often comment, people ask me, and I say, nobody ever reaches out.
Right.
There's a wealth of talent out there. Tony Garbolato is still out there. I'm out there. Like, there's another generation. Mark Clark is there. Like,
yeah.
I don't ever feel that people
really, that's such a shame to hear.
Really call on our experiences.
Yeah.
In any way, whether it's, hey, this is the journey, whether it's coaching. And there's been a number of individuals that have reached out, and I've helped and been involved with mentoring and guiding.
But at an organizational level.
Yeah. But, I'm home most summers, other than with the COVID stuff that's gone on. But
yeah.
And have expressed interest to help or to do a clinic or be part of a clinic. And it's just never been fully acted on. So I don't know. I just feel...
Wales guys.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I spoke to Gavin about that. And,
yeah, I'm sure.
Unfortunately, my situations this summer have changed a little bit.
No,
but,
of course.
It's anytime I'm back, then the opportunity exists, and I, would obviously love to be a help. And I think it's important that as you go through this journey, you do give back and you give experience.
Yeah.
So there are a number of things on my list of things that could be better, for sure. I'm not there. I don't see it on a day-to-day basis, but just from my experience and
I understand.
Knowing where I got to and how I wanted to get there.
Facilities and investment. Those are the two things that stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's coaches that are capable, but they have to be prepared to take the job for the opportunity, not for the money.
Not for the money.
And that's the biggest...
That's the risk.
Risk that a lot of coaches don't want to take.
Of course.
And in order for you to get better, I think you've got to go and you've got to be prepared to fail.
Yeah, and that's how it paid out for you,
Yeah, you're gonna get fired. It's just part of coaching. You're gonna get fired. You're gonna move on to a next job. You may be there for a period of time. My career has been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It's not been 10 years in one place.
It just doesn't happen anymore.
And that's partly, it's partly because of the opportunity, and I want to, your constant need and want for growth and knowledge and development. So,
well, fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much, Tim. Honestly, this has been such an insightful hour of conversation. I would happily call you up and just talk basketball with you every day. I'm really, really, really grateful for you giving your time to us here at the Basketball Wales podcast. And thank you for stopping in with us today. Thank you for sharing everything, all your experience with our viewers. It's a big catch for us to get a name like yours onto this. Well, good luck for the start of the season and your preparation with Minnesota. I hopefully I'll get to meet you in person one day, and I'll get to say thank you properly.
Absolutely. Anytime. I'm happy to jump on a call or do this anytime you want, if it's over the course of the season or you wanted to make a regular thing, whatever it is. And if
be careful, because I'll take you up on this. Be careful, I'll take you up on this.
Absolutely. I'm happy to oblige. And if I mentioned it to Gavin, obviously the opportunity to come and help or offer my help at any time. And likewise, if people got questions or want to reach out, then by all means feel free to do so.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much. And thank you, everyone watching at home. This has been another fantastic episode of the Pod Pilvarscade. We're here with myself, David Jones, and my fantastic guest, Tim Lewis. Until next time, I'll be seeing you. Thanks.